All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers, where we have the amazing Michaelbrent Collings. If you haven't heard him on the show, well, then you have no clue what a golden baby is or what they're used for.
You're in the lucky majority.
But more than likely, most of you have heard what a golden baby is and what Michaelbrent wants to do with one. But that's okay. We're not here to talk about that. So we're here to talk about.
And we already covered horse semen before we started. So.
Yes.
To be distinguished from being covered in horse semen, which is not okay.
Not okay. No, not at all. Nor is sitting in another booth where you have a live horse urinating next to you trying to do a podcast. It smells.
Yeah.
It's there. Yeah.
Pretty much anything that comes out of a horse, you should stay away from.
Yeah. Yes.
Unless it's a baby horse, and then they're so darling.
Then they're cute and cuddly, and you want to touch them. Yeah. So, the third book of the Sword Chronicles is out. Child of Ash. This has been a long 3-book series, and you are always excited when you wrap up a series. So
yeah, I like series, but it's I was not good at dating. I mean, I dated a lot, but it was always different people, and I'm finding out more and more as a writer. It's like, I think it's not because I was a player, it's just because my attention span and my ability to retain important information like birthdays or character names sucks. So
yeah, no, I have a notebook and I keep notes, but even then I'm still like, I forget stuff. It's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That character has she doesn't have brown hair. She was a blonde in the last book. I mean, granted, I could
totally
explain that by she got her hair dyed, but yeah, sometimes those small, minute details just slip your mind.
Yeah, I actually had some beta readers go, you're referring to a dead person, because I do that. Like, I forget names, or I will just start thinking of a random character from a previous book. And this is an epic trilogy. It's like, it's got a cast of hundreds over time, and it gets narrowed down because it's me, so people die. But still, it's like, I can't remember, was this person alive or dead, or did they have scars? And I actually have a 40-page triple column, single space, very small font concordance with every piece of information. Every time I mention a character, I will write down what that character, if something changed about them, or their hair color or eye color, all that stuff, where they came from, and it still freaking killed me.
Wow. That's insane. That's massively crazy. That does bring up a good question, because what do you do? Because you pump out quite a few books every year, and you've kind of moved back and forth. Like, Predators just came out, and you have those characters. Now you're here working on this book, and this is out, and you have those characters. How do you keep those separated, especially when you're working on multiple books like that?
Well, so that's the thing, is I'm not really working on multiple books. I am a fairly monogamous writer. I mean, I'm a serial monogamous, but I mostly just work on one thing at a time. So what'll happen is, like, when I was writing Predators, which is, like you mentioned, the last book I released, it came out 3 months ago. And by the time I was 2/3 of the way through that, I knew my next project was going to be to finish the Sword Chronicles. And so I didn't really think about it or write about it or, prep particularly, but it was in the back of my head, and I think my subconscious was sort of percolating. And that's really helpful, because then when I finished Predators and I closed it down and I moved it to the back burner, and, because I'm an indie, so I still have to do marketing, and I'm still sending out emails about Predators, but that's kind of empty brain work a lot of the time. And so it all basically was the equivalent of downtime for my brain to just sit there going, emails are really boring, so what can I think about? Oh, I know, I'll think about Sword Chronicles. So by the time I started outlining, I had a fairly good sense of where I was going to go, at least for the first little while. And that's pretty typical for how I work. By the time I'm winding down a book, by the time I get to the end, there comes a point like I don't know for every writer, but most writers I know, there's this point kind of towards the end of the middle where you're like, this is it. This is the one where everyone discovers I suck. And because I have no idea how I'm going to end it, or, write myself out of the corner I wrote myself into, and then it breaks and it works. And then it's really easy. In the last 100 pages, it's like, oh, I know exactly where everyone's going and I know what they're doing. And it just frees up a lot of brain space for me to start toying around with whatever the next project is going to be.
No, I will be honest. I'm glad to hear that you still have those moments where you're like, man, they're just going to find out I'm a fraud and I suck, because
every time.
My second book's coming out in June, and I feel like that, like all the time. It's like, man, this sucks. They're going to read this and they're thinking I'm just some idiot that just decided, I'm going to write a book.
Yep, and it never, I don't know about everybody, but for me, it never goes away. I mean, like, I've had a lot of people read my books, and I do okay, and to this day, when I'm, like, I will be at a signing, and people are there to have me sign their book, and when they walk up and say, I read your book, my immediate impulse is to lean back, because what if they're going to hit me?
Yeah. Yeah, my first thing is like, really? I have a neighbor. He has told me he's read my book 31 times, and every time he comes and tells me that, I'm like, really? Are you sure? And it's not to like say that I suck, but it's like, really, you've liked it that much that you've read it that many times, and like he keeps coming to me like, dude, does this happen in the second book? What about this? And I'm just like, yeah, you're gonna have to wait. Luckily, I can honestly say some of the things he's asked me about is like, ooh, that's a good idea. I
never would have thought of that, but that's excellent, and I will steal it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the secret between a mediocre writer. I think it was Sir Laurence Olivier. He was talking about actors, but it applies. He said, mediocre actors borrow from other actors. The great ones steal and make it better. Oh. So stealing is part of the job. You don't want to take people's concepts, but you see something they almost did right. And that, I tell people I love going to see crappy movies when I'm having a day where I'm just not feeling it, because there is nothing that makes me quite as animated as seeing a great piece of storytelling and going, man, I want to do that. Or a really crappy piece and going, oh, I could have fixed that so many ways.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's been several movies I've sat and I'm like, that's really cool. I need to do something in one of my stories that's like that, but better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, there's you can get creative ideas anywhere, and that's one of the fun things about being a writer too, is it's like you take your office where you go. You take your office is your brain, and you get to power up that particular computer anytime you see something interesting, which is, I mean, it's so fun. And that's one of the neatest things I think about being an author, is actually you get an excuse to engage your curiosity, because I think as we get older, like, it costs us more and more to ask questions because we don't want to feel dumb or look ignorant or have people not respect us. But if you're a writer, you can walk in and be like, this looks really cool. Can you tell me about it? Because I write books, and they're, people go, awesome.
Yeah. Yes. And I do know I'm probably on some list now because of my Google search, and I'm sure you are as well.
Oh, heck yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I never thought it would be that bad, but it's like, ooh, how do I make this work? And then you Google search it, and it's out there.
Yep. Oh, okay, so here's my awesome search history story. It's a little about search history. So I will work... I don't work at home because I don't want my wife to divorce me, and I think she would realize what a horrible person I am if I was home 24/7. So I go to like McDonald's, or I go to Starbucks, or just wherever has a Wi-Fi and some soda pop I can refill once or twice. So I went to McDonald's this one day, and I'm writing a screenplay in which the main character is getting tortured, but I didn't want to do electrical outlets and stuff that you see kind of every day. So I'm like, I'm going to go old school. And I started researching medieval horror or torture methods. And the two most disturbing things were, first of all, how many websites have that stuff? And second of all, how many of them seem to be run by teenagers? So I'm researching this stuff, though, and it's actually really fascinating. I'm looking through old illuminated manuscripts, the beautiful ones the priests would write, and some of them are about really specific, like, Inquisition here's how you break a person. So I'm looking at these, and then I realize I'm in the executive section. You know, some McDonald's think they're like, we're going to be sexy, and they put a little area that they're like, this is for Wi-Fi. So I'm sitting in their little executive section, and I realize their executive section is right next to the ball pit. So I am looking at some dude getting, you know, something shoved up his keister and coming out of his mouth as seen by a 15th century monk, and these little kids are playing. So I'm like, well, that's not good. And I turn the computer, just kind of trying to, you know, move the screen away. And then I realized I just became the creepy guy sitting outside the ball pit who is adjusting his computer for the children. And I left. Like, you couldn't recover.
No. No, you can't recover from that. No, I mean, the last book, when I was writing, I wanted to write this really cool scene where this villain horribly poisons this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Went searching for it. Yeah, there's tons of material on that, and what type of poisons do what, and how it reacts with their body. And I'm just like, wow, this is something I never realized I wanted to know. But hey, that's cool. That'll work.
Yeah, oh, totally. Yeah, totally. It's you know what's weird, too, is like the things you can't find. Because you find a lot of stuff. It's like, here's how to make a nuclear weapon. And you could find that. And then for my Colony series, which is a zombie series, and the main characters get on a train at one point, and they're traveling around. And it's all set in a specific location, so I am following actual landmarks. And I was like, I want to get the train stuff right, so I'm going to look up the train route, and I could not find it because that's hard target infrastructure stuff. So you cannot find like the layout of the railroad tracks across the United States. The only way you can do that is to, you know, follow them in a car or walk them and do your own mapping, because they just don't show up in search results and stuff. And then I reached out to some of the train companies, and though most people really are receptive, if you're like, I'm a writer and I want to write about this, they love showing you stuff. But I called these train companies, and man, I was expecting Homeland Security the way they reacted. Why do you want to know? I told you I'm a writer. A likely story.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was researching the layouts of airplanes. Nope, those aren't available either. They don't want you to know where you can place certain things.
Well, you could probably figure out how to buy a child, but easier than you could do that stuff, frankly.
Yes, very much so. So, let's talk about Sword Chronicles, because we kind of went away from that, which...
It went so dark
it
for
happens.
a second.
So...
it's been fun. I'm really glad. I am glad it's done, because it was a huge series. It was, you know, each book was... It got into Brandon Sanderson lengths at times, and I'm not someone who typically writes books that are that long, so I had to do some cutting and stuff to keep it at the level that I like, but it was a lot of fun. And one of the things I like best about it was it's a hardcore fantasy book for one book, 2 books, and the very last line of the second book, you realize you're in a science fiction world. And so it moves from superpowered people who have these gifts, these magic powers, and they all have these amazing abilities. And then in the third book, they're talking about genetic drift and, gene modification and stuff like that. So you find out you're in a very different world than you had assumed for the first 2. It starts out as a very, kind of in the Tolkien epic quest kind of, legacy or tradition, and then by the end of book 3 you are in a Star Trek episode, and I had a lot of fun with that.
That sounds like fun, especially when you kind of like pull the curtain out and you're like, surprise.
Haha, you thought you were reading fantasy, but I tricked you, and you really do like science fiction.
And they both have their great places. I love science fiction and fantasy, both in their own realms. They've got great points. That's the reason why people love Star Trek, or they love Star Wars. Some people. Yeah. It depends on whose camp you're in, but
I like them both. I'm very Catholic.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. But honestly, I'll admit there's nothing more cooler than a blazing sort of light that cuts through everything compared to a phaser. It does, and a tricorder. It just doesn't work for me, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, Star Trek is the hunt for Red October in space. I mean, and that's cool, but submarine warfare and chess games are a very different creature, and they do have a more limited audience, and that's why Star Trek has never been quite the huge, sprawling, extended universe kind of thing. I mean, they've got all their spin-offs and stuff like that, but they haven't had the cultural resonance of Star Wars, and I think that is simply because of the cool factor. It is, every kid who saw Star Wars wanted to have a lightsaber, and not every kid who saw Star Wars was like, can I have a flip phone and a tricorder?
Yeah. Except for my dad.
So, yeah.
My dad has those. And the uniform.
Dude, I loved my flip phone, man.
Yeah. And he has to point out every time, you know where a flip phone came from, right? I'm like, yes, yep. I know. It was.
I actually had a Star Wars model. It was called the Star Wars model flip phone.
I mean Star Trek?
Or Star Trek.
Yeah.
Star Trek, rather. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Please don't beat on me, loyal fans.
No. I know they had those. But you're right. It is kind of the hunt for Red October in space, and we'll go to the next planet and hello, how are you type thing.
Well, like Wrath of Khan, the whole ending is absolutely a submarine chase. They rig for silent running, and they can't see each other, and they're moving around three-dimensionally through this swirling vortex instead of the ocean. But it was all the same stuff I'd seen in Das Boot or any of the World War II submarine movies I saw with my grandpa once upon a time, and I love that stuff. I actually just watched Hunt for Red October with my two oldest kids who finally got old enough to be able to put themselves in a 1980s thriller mindset.
Right. I love the Hunt for Red October. Don't get me wrong. Sean Connery is amazing, one of my all-time favorite actors. But he's Russian, and he speaks with a Scottish accent the whole time.
I know. There was some stinker moments, but I will say I loved the way they switched from Russian to English, because in the beginning everyone's speaking Russian, and he's still speaking Russian with my little babushka, but he's speaking Russian, and then there's a moment where a guy is reading a passage from something written by Oppenheimer, who created the atomic bomb, and as he reads, the camera pushes in on his mouth, and when it gets to the very last moment, he switches to English, and it reels out, and there's no more Russian in it. Oh, just that moment, it was such a good moment. I love instances like that where you go, wow, I am in the hands of somebody who knows how to tell this story the best way. Not just a good way, but there was no way they could have done that better. And I live for those little moments in storytelling.
Well, it definitely was good, because then you didn't have to worry about reading subtitles or anything like that. And so
it was beautiful.
It's now English, so you can pretend that you can speak Russian. But it was weird, because everyone else was speaking English, but he was Scottish. But that's okay.
Yeah, right.
That's okay.
Well, but, the other people, they all had British accents. I mean, it had Sam Neill in it, and so he's sitting there trying not to be Australian half the time. So the accents, yes, were all over the place. But I just said in my head, I was like, okay, so Scottish accent is the dubbed equivalent of Georgian, and Australian English, he must be Ukrainian. So I just kind of made up a little. They just got really complex with their casting to keep it actually really consistent.
He's Ukrainian. There you go. Yes. Now it's time to drink some vodka. Now I'm gonna have to go watch that movie again. It's a classic. There's some movies that I just love to watch, and my kids just shake their head, like Highlander. I love Highlander. I don't know how many times I can.
Oh my gosh.
Not watch that movie, and my kids just walk in and go like, "Really, this again?" And it's like, how can you not love this?
Because it's terrible. I love it too. But I remember I was watching TV and it comes on, and my wife and I had just been married about 2 or 3 years, I think. And I go, come here, you got to watch this. It's the best movie ever. Guy lives forever unless he gets his head chopped off. And she's like, sounds great. And I go, sword fights in New York. So she sits down, and she was actually getting into it because she's awesome, until the love scene kind of happens, and there's that awful song, you want to live forever. And she just that was it. She went, and we're done. She just couldn't hang with that music.
Yep, Queen comes in. I mean, the rest of the soundtrack is awesome, but yeah, that was kind of...
Oh, man. And that's another one, Sean Connery. He's an Egyptian Irishman. Like, I lived 600 years ago in Egypt and was given this samurai sword by the queen of the night. You know, it's like, wow, you guys really didn't check your geography at all.
Yeah.
That's and he's like an Egyptian named Ramirez who speaks with a Welsh accent. It's great.
Yeah. Well, he's traveled around a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. You pick up accents and you know, skin color, I guess.
Yeah. But Sean Connery, you just let him do his thing. Too bad he doesn't act anymore. He would have been an awesome Dumbledore. You know.
Oh, he would have been better than what's his name? Who was the second one? The first one was Richard Harris, right?
Yeah, Richard Harris.
And he was fantastic. The second guy, I never could get behind.
Yeah, what is his name? I everyone knows I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, so that's not too amazing that I don't know it. Yeah.
Hey, not to interrupt your awesome interview, but I'm hearing a buzz. Is it messing up on your side, or is it just me?
I'm not hearing a buzz, but it could be something.
You're back.
Oh, you can hear me.
Went away.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it went away. Okay, so the thing with Dumbledore that ticked me off, the first Dumbledore was so good because he was just he knew everything. You could not outmaneuver Dumbledore, and there's that Obi-Wan Kenobi, not even Obi-Wan Kenobi, like he had the Yoda thing going. Yoda was just always calm because he knew whatever was going to happen would happen, and he would and could deal with it. Yeah. And then the second Dumbledore came in, and he just seemed like a pissed-off ex-hippie who realized that flower power didn't work and never quite recovered. It's just the whole look of him and his attitude, and he was always barking, and I was kind of going, man, I would have bailed if I was Harry and for Dumbledore too.
Yeah, it was Michael Gambon who played the other one.
Yes.
But I don't know.
And he's a good actor.
He is, and I know with the Fantastic Beast, Jude Law as him being younger.
Oh, nailed it.
Yeah, definitely did a great job. But he looks more closer to Richard Harris than Michael Gambon.
Yes.
So it's just kind of like...
And he played it like Richard Harris, too.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, wow, Dumbledore really aged badly between year 2 and 3.
Yeah, but you think that was like 100 years later. So, I mean, if you think about the math, he's doing pretty good. He looked like a pretty spry 80-year-old, and he's like 114, according to that timeline.
Yeah. I would like to be able to be that spry at 114.
I don't know, man. People say, like, oh, I'd love to live that old, but I tell my wife, kind of jokingly, I say, when I'm 50, I'm going to take up skydiving, like really dangerous halo drops and stuff like that. Because I don't know if I'd be a good super old person. I think my body has fallen apart enough to this point that I do not foresee a future where I'm one of those dudes running around at 90 power walking and then unicycling and stuff like that. I'm going to be one of those people who's like, change my bedpan, it's too heavy.
But you could be like Lee Rogers and get like bionic parts, like bionic legs and arms and stuff.
I've got that stuff. I've got like steel pins in my neck, and say, other outside cybernetics is highly overrated, at least in today's technology.
You're right, but by the time maybe 50's coming around, no, just kidding. Maybe you will. Like telescopic eyes.
And they'll be like, who can we put all this incredible hardware into? I know, that writer guy. Because who needs to be able to jump over buildings like a writer who's going to sit and eat chips every day?
But hey, they'll know you're a perfect guinea pig because you've already said you want a gold baby inside you. So hey,
that's true. That's true. The gold baby thing is a perk.
That's the entryway.
And it goes back to the web browser thing too, because they'll be, they can come and say it's incredibly dangerous and it will hurt a lot, and I'll go, no way, and they'll say, we will show your browser history to all the people at church, and I'll be like, please don't do that.
I'll say that,
but not for the normal.
Give you the
not for the normal reason.
Yeah.
And they're going, oh, did you hear about Michaelbrent's browser? Oh, is he into like weird porn? No, but he has looked up how to blow things up way too many times.
Yeah. I've done that myself. And what kind of guns can actually mow a door in half? And
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Of course, that's why I just call Larry Corriea for that. I'll just admit my ignorance and phone somebody who knows all that stuff.
Yeah, I should probably invest in the Larry Corriea knowledge more.
I get to tell everybody. So if you don't know Larry Corriea, he is a very successful author. He writes a really cool series called Monster Hunter International, and he writes an even better series, which is less well known, but it's his like masterpiece. The first book is called Son of the Black Sword. And so he's a big gun enthusiast. He used to own his own gun shop. He wrote literally the most shared piece on gun control in internet history. And we went shooting, and I outshot him my second time ever shooting.
Wow.
Yes. Now, granted, he had a severely sprained wrist, and he was shooting with his wrong hand on the sprained wrist. But
hey,
the point
a win is a win.
On my second time ever.
Yep, you can say you outshot Larry. That's a win.
Hey, man. Totally. Hey, you know what? The Olympics, the gold medalist is the gold medalist, and it doesn't matter if the guy who's usually better hurt himself the day before.
Exactly.
He's still the frickin' gold medalist.
Yep, that is true. That's like it. The Xbox achievements that pop up. You had beat Larry Corriea pop up right over your head at that moment.
Totally. And he's fun too, because when we went and shot, it was really cool because I'd never shot before. He took me my first time, and he said, I'll bring some guns. And I know what guns are because I watch cop shows.
Yeah.
And he goes, what do you want to shoot? And I said, what do you got? And I expected he'd, pull out a couple guns, or he'd even do the kind of action hero thing where he pulls out a gun from his pocket and another gun from his holster and another gun from behind. Well, he pulls out this satchel, and it was like a scroll of guns. He just unrolled it across the table, and there were 15 guns. He goes, we'll start with this one, which is, the 22, the little one. And it went all the way up to these very awesome, large, scoped rifles. And, it was so fun. We had a good time.
Tell me, at least you got to fire a Desert Eagle.
I did.
Nice.
I did. And that one was actually anticlimactic because you hear so much about those. Like, it's got a pretty big kick. And I went, meh. I mean, I for better or for worse, maybe it's my inner psychotic, but I did not have the gun fear that a lot of people have. I didn't stress about it. I was just like, so how do you do it? And he showed me, and I shot, and I hit the target every time. It was not a huge, scary thing. I really had fun. Which probably makes me sound like a bad person. But
no,
fun.
I don't think you are. Just like any other, like a sword or a battle axe, it's a weapon. You can have fun with it. It's not like you're going out and mowing people down with them. You're out shooting targets and blowing up watermelons or stuff like that, or out shooting Larry Corriea. So that's awesome.
Right? I am actually going to put that as my tagline for every book from now on. Every book, the description is not going to be about the book. It's just going to say, I outshot Larry Corriea.
Should have that on your table. Big old, like, gold, a medal. Outshot Larry Corriea, awesome. So buy my book.
Yeah, except for, now, if he ever hears this, he's going to just take me and beat the crap out of me.
He probably will. It's like, okay, Michaelbrent, my wrist isn't hurting. We gotta solve this.
Yeah, we're going to shoot again. Okay, why are you pointing at me this time, Larry?
That or this time he's going to, turn backwards, blindfold himself, and do it that way.
Oh, well, so the first time we shot, it's really interesting because, I did okay. He was like, you've never shot before? Because I hit what I aimed at pretty much every time,
Yeah.
I couldn't draw a happy face on the target, but I think it was 25 yards out to start, and I put everything in center mass, and so he was really impressed, and I was like, oh, I'm pretty good. Maybe, I'm a prodigy. And then he pulls out his guns, and, it was like, I think he just shot through the same hole every time. And then he, I guess he used to be like a state-level rated shotgun did competitive shotgun. So he pulls out a shotgun and he shows how to shoot it, and I shot it, and it was fun. And then he grabs 5 shells. He's got hands the size of like Nebraska. So he grabs 5 shells and just sticks them between his fingers. As he's pumping, he is loading faster than I could just pump. And I'm sitting there, every once in a while you see something that goes, wow, that's what an expert looks like. Because a lot of our lives, I think we confuse being pretty good at stuff for expert. And then you meet an expert and you go, oh, yeah, I'm not like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely understand that. I mean, I'm pretty decent, I would say. I'm not amazing because, my grandpa taught me how to shoot and how to hold the gun right and everything like that. But there are some people, and Larry's one of them, when he's talking about in his books how people are like loading quickly and stuff like that, it's probably because he really can do that. He knows exactly how to do that, and he's not just like, oh yeah, I met this other guy and he showed me how to do this. No, Larry can do it.
Yeah.
So.
Which is fun. I love, and that's so neat. That's a neat thing about hanging out with authors is they're really, we grew up, I think now nerds are cooler. And when I was a kid,
you hid in the closet and never talked about it.
Yeah, it wasn't, being a nerd wasn't cool. It meant you got beat up and stuff. And so a lot of people who are older than 35, say, kind of view nerds differently, I think. And so it's really surprising, even to me, when I talk to an author and he goes, oh, I'm a state-ranked shotgun competitor. I was talking to Jonathan Mayberry, who's another great author, writes a wonderful series called the Joe Ledger books. Super popular, has a Netflix series coming out, I think, this year called V Wars, which is going to be a lot of fun. And we're sitting there just kind of rapping, and he's like an 8th degree black belt. He's been doing martial arts his whole life, and you just kind of don't tend to put that image together. I'm a writer. Oh, I can also kill you with a popsicle stick and make it look easy,
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Actually, there are quite a few authors I know that are black belts and stuff like that, and some of them women.
Well, I've done martial arts my whole life too, and it does kind of make sense because you realize, like, hey, I'm really tired of getting beaten up, and that's what happened to me. But even so, even though I do that stuff, and I have swords on my wall, and that's going to be my big plan when my oldest daughter starts dating, is to have each boy meet me in front of the sword cabinet and say, your choice if you mess up will be which one of these goes in you. Mm-hmm. That'll be the last choice you get.
Yep.
So, like, I do that stuff, and I've always done that stuff, and it's still, part of me goes, but that doesn't seem very writerly. So when I meet a writer who does something like that, oh, well, I played, I was on the football team at UCLA, I was a starter, or I did shooting competitions, or I'm a 44-degree black belt, and beat up Bruce Lee in an alley fight. It just still seems kind of weird, but it's not. Authors are really cool people, and they're interested in all sorts of different stuff, and that makes them endlessly fascinating because they're always, it's not somebody who's going to come up and say the same thing typically over and over and over again. It's going to be a new thing every day depending on what they're writing about or reading about. And
yeah.
I think that's just such a privilege to live a life where I get to research and educate myself on whatever I feel like that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a job where you never stop learning, kind of.
Yeah, not at all. And it's fantastic. So hopefully enough people buy the Sword Chronicles books so I can keep doing it.
Yeah. They should. I mean, your books, honestly, your books are great. They're fantastic. I definitely have a lot more to learn before I get to that level. Especially, I mean, there's sometimes you just put in twists in the way you describe things. I feel like I'm pretty good, but I have yet to have scared someone so badly that they have to walk through their own house, which they know the doors are locked, with their lights on. So, yes.
So I'm talking to somebody at a convention, and this other guy kind of walks up behind her, and he, just out of nowhere, he says, that book scares me so bad. I was reading it, and all of a sudden my gun was in my lap. And I wasn't sure if that was more of a sales point for me or against me.
I say that was a 4.
She did buy the book, and he's a cool guy. I say it jokingly, but I'd met him before, and we became friends and stuff. But oh yeah, he said, the first time I read your book, I'm reading it, and it was terrifying. And I looked down and I realized I had kept reading the book, gone to my gun cabinet, unlocked it one-handed, and sat with it on my lap because I was terrified.
Wow. No, I mean, I grew up watching horror movies like nonstop. They normally don't affect me in any way, shape, or form. I read your book and I end up like sweating bullets, or it's like, oh, I start looking out my windows and stuff like that, walking through my house with the lights on. So I mean, that's great because I don't normally get scared. So I love that because it's something that's actually terrifying enough that it's like, okay,
it is fun.
I bought into the story, I bought into what's going on, and it's terrifying me. I'll watch like
well, that makes me feel good.
Yeah, I'll watch movies like The Saw or Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm just like, this is stupid. Why did I pay money to see this? I mean, I went and saw The Ring, same thing.
Well, it's because you know why? It's because I think part of it is, and I get those comments a lot, as far as people say like, oh, that never scared me, and this did, and I think part of it's because I tend to write about families, and I tend to write about things that more people understand, because as fun as those movies that you mentioned are, they're all kind of in that teenager, or at least people who are very attractive and not necessarily actively engaged in life. They're all kind of at that play stage of their lives, and we've all been there to some degree or other, but then we move into stuff that's more stable. And of course, more stable means if you lose it, it hurts more. And I think that's one of the things that freaks people out most is I tend to put families in danger, and there's no guarantee that the kids will make it, or that the parents will make it. And that scares people, because at a base level, we all want to go home and find mommy and daddy there, or find our kids there, or our spouse, or whatever it is. So the idea that those basic things can be taken is a scary thing.
Oh, no, I agree. Yeah. I've woken up in a cold sweat, from a nightmare of something happened to one of my kids. It's like, ah! But, you immediately run in and check on them. Oh, they're safe. Everything's good. I can breathe now. But, it is definitely terrifying.
Yeah, I will. If my kids don't wake up, I'll go, hey, hey. And like the third one is I start punching, because part of my brain just goes to like, what if they're dead, And it just completely upends me.
Yeah, I've been there, same place where like they're so dead asleep that you kind of nudge them and nothing, and then you're like, are they breathing? And you got to get closer and examine, and if it doesn't look like it is, okay, and you nudge a little bit harder, hey, and then they wake up like, leave me alone. Like, okay, you're good.
Yep.
I can go relax.
Go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. Pretend this never happened. Yeah, I have that same thing, and it happens, of course, when they're sleeping, and I can't see very well in the dark. Like, I've lost a lot of my night vision acuity, and because I have done martial arts for most of my life, I don't have a lot of feeling in my hands. Like, I mean, I have punched hard things for long periods of time, and it messes with your nerve endings, and so, like, I look at them, and I go, I can't tell if they're breathing because it's too dark. I'll feel them. I don't know if they're breathing, so, yeah, again, I go, hello, and the third hello is very loud and very much a get up because you're freaking me out kind of thing. And then the dumb part, this is such a parent thing, you go, wake up, and they do, and you're like, oh shoot, go back to sleep.
Yeah. No, go back to bed, it's okay. Yeah. And then you get upset because they wake up and now
I didn't want you to be up, I just wanted to know you were alive. Can't we just agree you're alive and have you go back to sleep?
Yeah. Yes, that would be nice. But unfortunately, that doesn't always work.
Yeah. Well, these are the secrets you find out as a parent.
Yep.
But it's all good story stuff.
Yeah, I love my kids, but man, sometimes.
Well, here's the thing too: is like people. I think the hardest thing about being a parent isn't the ups or the downs; it's that they happen so close together, and it's like emotional whiplash 82 times a day. Because you look at this kid who just, it's like, oh, I decided to cut my hair, and then set fire to the cat, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to murder you, and then he goes, but look at this face I'm making, and you go, oh, I love you so much, and then the next second it's, I stuck something in a light socket and the house burned down, and it's so fast, back and forth, and I did not know it was possible to love someone so much and just hate everything that they were doing so much, so many times a day.
Yeah. My 5-year-old, I love her to death, but you'll walk in and you can see the disaster that she has just made.
Oh, yeah.
And then she just looks up at me, kind of tilts her head and goes, hi, and does her little smile, and you're like, don't even try to play cute here. You're in trouble. You just like the other night, she drew all over the wall in butter because we took her crayons away. So she's like, okay, forget you. I'm gonna use butter. So she
Hey, that's a
butter
problem solver.
all over the window, all over the wall, and then I walk in there and I'm like, what in the world did you do? I got bored.
Made perfect sense in her head, I guarantee you.
Yeah. Oh, so what's going to happen in wrapping up this series with Child of Ash? Let's talk about that a little bit, because yet again we've wandered.
All right. Back to book stuff. So, like I said, the basic concept of the series is there are these 5 mountains, and that is where the great majority of the book takes place, is on top of the 5 mountains. They're connected by bridges, and that is where the empire that this book is placed in occurs. It's on top of these mountains, and no one's ever gone down them, because everyone who goes down the mountain, there's a cloud bank 1,000 feet below, and anyone who goes in the next morning, they show up nailed to a spike in front of the palace, and no one knows how they get there. So it's this closed system. And in the first book, one of the things they do to keep population down is they sell their kids to become gladiators. But there's no chance of escape. These kids are just going to fight until they're dead. And one day, one of the girls who's in these, they're called kennels. They call the kid dogs. They strip them of their identity. And one of the dogs is this woman, or this girl, this teenager, and she is about to be killed by the opposing team, and someone throws a knife at her feet, which is against the rules, and she picks it up anyways. And so there's riflemen. It's a magic world, at least in the first book, but the magic fuels technology. So they have guys who shoot essentially guns that are just, they have enchanted pieces of metal that will fling out very fast when you open up a chamber, and these guys shoot her, and she cuts the bullets out of the air. So it turns out she is this incredibly powerful magic user, and she becomes an assassin for the Empire, kind of keeping order and keeping things in line. And of course finds out eventually that she might be fighting for the wrong people, and the rebels that she's been hunting and killing might be the good guys. So the first book is sort of just her journey finding out what she is and who she is, and then the second book, they have fixed some things, and the problem with fixing things is it always causes more things to break. We can never get to a point where everything's just hunky-dory, because there's always unintended consequences to actions. So the whole second book is dealing with unintended consequences of everything in the first book, and then at the end of the second book, like I said, it kind of pulls the rug out and says, this world that you thought you were in, it's much bigger, and it's completely different than what you imagined. So Child of Ash was lots of fun, because I got to take a fantasy universe and, like I said earlier, put it into a world where they're talking about genetic modifications and mutations and environmental disasters and things like that we worry about today to some extent. And seeing if I could tie up a bunch of fantasy threads into neat little science fiction bows. And I think it worked. I think, the early readers have really enjoyed it, and reviews are coming on that think it's uniformly great, and that's really gratifying. But mostly I was just I sat back and went, wow, I did that.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So what project is next? You definitely have probably a plethora of ideas running on in your head.
Next up, I am going to do a piece called Scavenger Hunt, and some people go on a game show. It's one of those reality TV shows kind of thing, and they're given scavenger hunts. So there's going to be 5 or 6 players, and they go to the first house, and they each have like a little Apple Watch that flashes what they're supposed to get, and they say, can I have a ball? And the second house, their Apple Watch says, get a toy. Can I get a toy? And the third house, it flashes and says, steal something worth $10,000 or more. And it very quickly becomes a very different sort of game that brings out the worst and the best in them.
Okay. Sounds extremely interesting. Kind because there could be a lot that happens. Who knows? They might get a message: kill your neighbor.
Yep, stuff like one of the houses is not going to be a big spoiler, but one of the houses, the thing they have to find is a dead body, and very quickly realize that there are no dead bodies in the house, so they might have to make one.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's a happy story.
Yes, it sounds like a joyous trip to McDonald's to go get a Happy Meal.
Yep. Pretty much. Well, but they all kind of are. I mean, even the ones that I write books that do end badly sometimes, but I tell people, they're books that still are hopeful because, first of all, for horror to matter, it has to exist in a universe where there's a real thing called good and a real thing called bad, and so that reminds us there are good things out there. And the neat thing about books, scary books in particular, I think, is even in a book where everybody dies and it says the end, it's a lie, because you close the book and the end just means time to start a new story. And I think that has a real value in our lives, knowing that no matter how dark things get, the end really rarely is the end. Usually it's an excuse or an opportunity to start something new, and very often that new thing is brighter and nicer than what we already enjoyed.
Yeah. So, one more question. Is there ever going to be a sequel to the con book where all sorts of craziness was happening in The Longest Con?
I would love it. So for those of your listeners who don't know, I wrote this story called The Longest Con, and the concept is everyone, knows that people go to Comic Cons and dress as monsters, but what you don't know is monsters go to Comic Cons and cosplay as people. And the problem, of course, is that monsters tend to eat and murder real people. So the con organizers seed sort of like undercover air marshals throughout the area. And those marshals are in charge, they're called wardens, and they're in charge of keeping the peace and keeping murders from happening or solving the murder and punishing the monster when they do. So that's kind of the concept. The fun of it, though, is that all of the main characters are friends of mine who are big-name authors who play the main parts in the book. So Larry Corriea in it as a supernatural arms dealer. Kevin J. Anderson, who writes, Star Wars books and Dune books, and he's a fantastic author. He plays the essentially most powerful wizard in the world, and Orson Scott Card's in it, and Dave Butler, Mercedes Yardley, just lots of fun people. And so, I'd like to do a sequel. I talked to Jim Butcher, actually, at the last con we were both at, because I would love for him to be a bad guy. And he's got this really big, luxurious mane of hair, so I was kind of toying with it being a wig secretly, and he's bald, kind of a Lex Luthor guy. Because that's part of the fun. Like, Kevin Anderson plays this mean guy in the first book, and it was playing against who Kevin is, because he is probably, if
super
anything,
nice
he's
guy.
too nice. He's one of those too nice people.
And then you made, like, Dave Butler a giant robot that licks things, if I remember right.
Yes, so he's an enchanted, he does not know magic exists. Dave is a pretty successful author too, and he's brilliant. He literally, I can call him and go, "What's up?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm just reading a book in Etruscan, And he's just super brilliant. So I thought I'll make him a forensics kind of machine that can pick up monster DNA, but that wasn't quite fun enough, so I made it that he's enchanted, and it only works when he's enchanted, and the way he tests things is by licking them. So he's constantly going around licking body parts and trying to pick up DNA samples by licking random strangers, and that was a lot of fun. Dave's a really good friend of mine, so it was like I got to call him up and be like, "Dude, you are going to crap yourself when you read this."
It was a great book. So I would love to see a sequel.
Yeah, I'd have to stick you in it probably, huh?
I would not say no. I would definitely not say no. Whether I die or live, completely different story. I don't care. But
I've red shirt, yeah.
Yeah, well, it fits. I have red hair, so yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. That would be awesome. Yeah, so long answer, short question. Yeah, I would love to do it, and hopefully I will get around to it. Being my own publisher and marketing guy and indie author, and there's always kind of a question of what do I think is going to sell next? What do I think my fans need and want? And that's a very fluid thing. So it's hard to plan out much beyond the next 2 books, and things get real hazy at that point. But I would definitely love to return to the world. That was one of the most fun I had. And I'm one of the characters too. I'm the warden who has to solve this murder, and I'm constantly in over my head, which is pretty accurate to reality. So it was kind of fun to vent that stuff, and I got to be really sarcastic and snarky in the book.
Nice.
And it's a fun book.
Yeah. Definitely is. So where can I'm for those that know you, they already know where to find you. But those that don't know you and have enjoyed our conversation and are like, okay, I need to read what this crazy guy is writing. Where can they find you?
So the easiest way to find me is either my website, which is called writteninsomnia.com. It's easy to remember. It's Written Insomnia, stories that keep you up all night. Or my first name is Michaelbrent, and if you just Google that, all is one word, Michaelbrent, you'll come up with my Amazon page and my IMDb page and my website and all that, because there are no other Michaelbrents in the world.
Which, that's good. You know.
Yeah, it makes me easy to find.
You know,
it's awesome.
When you're Dan Wells, you go to look for him, you find a weird, crazy
8
underwear
million.
model.
That's me too, but...
You secretly, yes.
Yeah, it's my double life. I will tell you, though, that trying to figure out, because I design my own book covers, and trying to figure out a cool way to write Michaelbrent Collings was a bitch, because it just takes up so much space.
Yes. I can see that. Maybe just come up with a really cool MBC logo. Not NB, but MBC.
Yeah, I actually toyed with that, because... And honestly, if I had it to do over, I probably would. I'd go like full Cher or Madonna, and I'd just be Michaelbrent.
Yeah.
But I've already branded myself as Michaelbrent Collings, so I dug that hole, and now I have to stay in it.
That's okay. But you could be like Prince and just like, hey, I'm reinventing myself, so I'm now the weird oblong symbol on whatever keyboard.
Yeah, I'd be the artist formerly known as Michaelbrent Collings. I think that would take up more cover space.
More cover space. Oh, that could just be the whole book title.
Yeah, right. The artist formerly known as Michaelbrent Collings. That would be a Longest Con sequel, definitely.
Yeah, that might be awesome. So, all right, folks. There are so many books, I can't even list them off, that Michaelbrent has put out. Just look them up. They're all fantastic. Like we talked about earlier, there was Predators that recently came out. There are all 3 books of the Sword Chronicles available to you, and so much more, like the Colony series. Check it out, buy some books, make Michaelbrent happy, and then get that crap scared out of you, because it will happen. So with that said, we're out of here.
Thanks, Dan.
Dungeon Crawler.